Thank you. So we were really brainstorming on what we thought would be a good topic of discussion for this panel. And we know that the attendance is growing year on year, so we really wanted to try and do something different. I know all of you have been in loads of sessions, not only at this conference, but at other conferences, talking about AI, the future of transaction banking, digital assets, et cetera. But we wanted to make it real and really talk about how do we turn career setbacks into opportunity, whether the setback be on a personal level or because the industry around us is vastly changing. And working in transaction banking, I know we're all seeing that every day. And you're going to hear some real stories from people up on this panel. I think people have the assumption sometimes that if you're a managing director operating at a senior level, somehow you've been immune in your career to disruption. And I think we're all here to tell you that that's not true. And you can learn and grow from all of these experiences. So I'm really delighted to have our wonderful panelists and also to have Nicole Meyer moderating this great panel. And Nicole, I'd like to welcome you up to the stage to introduce the panelists. But thanks to everyone again, and we really welcome all your questions and participation.
Welcome, everybody. So I am really going to assume that most of you know these distinguished panelists, so I'm not even going to get into a long conversation about who they are and what they do. I encourage you, first of all, if you don't know them, you need to know them. Get to know them. We are excited. I'm actually going to sit down, but I am going to invite Christian Stolk to come up and sit with me. Christian is with Bank of America. I'm honestly not going into anything more. We're going to let him chat about things when he sits down.
Perfect, thank you.
Please sit down. And Stephanie Wolf. Stephanie Wolf, again, you all know Stephanie, formerly with Bank of America, now on to bigger and brighter things as board members. And then, of course, we all know today's award recipient, Trish. So with that, please, I encourage you to ask questions. Put them onto Slido. We're going to ask some questions in a moment. With that, I'm going to sit myself down. On? Yep. All right. Look, the topic for today, and we've talked about it, today you are going to hear the panelists talk about how they navigated through personal and professional setbacks. Pivots in their career that they anticipated, that they didn't anticipate, and you're going to hear lessons in resilience. And I hope that's what you've all come to hear. If not, that would be a moment of pivot for all of us. So, with that, I do want to ask the panelists why this is such an important topic for each of them. And I'm going to actually, Christian, start with you, if that's all right, and then we'll just go down the line there. Why is this so important? Why are you here?
That's perfect. And first of all, thanks for everybody for attending in such great volume and interest. And I hope that's not just because of the free lunch. It's a great topic. It's a very important topic. I think for me personally, the topic of repositioning yourself in your career path is going to be even more relevant in the future because change is clearly accelerating over proportionally. So I think nobody debates that. So I think we need to be more and more ready to deal with the unknown, deal with the unforeseen. For me personally, it means a lot because I've basically repositioned myself in my career every 3 to 5 years, max. So that's, if you do the math, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but it's you know, it's probably 5 or 6 times in my career path. And not all of those were in my control. There was M&A involved, there was restructuring involved. So I think it is just so much more powerful if you're actually planning out alternatives, when you open your option space and when you're learning from the different opportunities that present yourself. I know we'll get into concrete cases later, but I think it's it can be extremely rewarding to build that into your skill sets of repositioning. So it's actually not a adversity, it's actually a skill set that will build competitive advantage in the marketplace for yourself. So that's how I'm looking at the topic.
Thank you. Trish?
Can you hear me? Great. So this topic is really important to me because it actually led me to a wonderful new career opportunity that I never would have planned. So before I joined Deutsche Bank, I was the global co-head of financial crime compliance at Standard Chartered Bank. And when I had that role, I was based in London. But there came a point where, because of some family reasons, I really needed to relocate back to New York. And as part of that process, the bank also decided that they wanted to go from a co-head model to one head of financial crime compliance. And there was a strong preference that that one head be based in the headquarters, which was London. So that was a pretty significant career disruption for me. I was not prepared to go back to London. And I'd already reached what you would say was the pinnacle of, of financial crime compliance, already having been in that global co-head role. So there wasn't further opportunities for me there. So I started talking to people I knew at Deutsche Bank that also was facing some financial crime challenges. And in talking to people at Deutsche Bank, along the way, someone asked me a question that I never anticipated. They said, where do you think you could make the most impact? And I said, I actually think I can make the most impact by working in the business. And had that question not been posed to me, I don't know that I would have made the career choice I made to go to Deutsche Bank in the first line, but here I am, and it's led to even greater things.
Hello, everyone. I'm here today because I don't want to leave this room before every single person in this room agrees not to let their employer write their story. You need to be aggressive and methodical in pathing and charting your career, and don't leave it to someone else. I'm going to make it a little personal now because I'm going to talk a little bit later about networking and reputation. I'm going to start with the people on the panel. The woman to my immediate right, I did not know several years ago, but by virtue of sitting on 2 of Deutsche Bank's America-based boards, I've gotten to know Trish Sullivan and her team, and she's helped to educate me about Deutsche Bank and its position in the global payments landscape. I'm going to skip you, Christian, for a moment. I'm going to go to the woman at the end of the row. Nicole Meyer, I met many years ago. She started out as a friend, and then she played a role in a pivot in my career when I was changing organizations, and she helped chart that organization as the CEO of a firm that helps in just those situations, and that was of great benefit, and she's an even closer friend today. I saved Christian until last. Christian started out as a client, and then he turned into a friend. And then when I decided that I was ready to retire because spending 12 weekends a year somewhere other than my home for my global job was growing a little bit tiring, I met Christian at this conference several years ago, and I thought, he's the one. If he's interested, I'll bet he could come to Bank of America and do great things with the global financial services business, and of course he has. So that's why I'm here today.
Am I on? There we go. Could we have the Slido questions next, please? So everybody get out your phones, and the Slido questions are, drum roll. Are you anticipating a disruption in the next 12 to 24 months? We're not defining disruption, but something that causes you to take attention, take a decision, make a decision. I think we're done. We are at 100%. I really wanted one person to say no, but I'm not going to get that today, am I? All right, thank you. And the next question.
3%, no.
Oh, who was that? No, don't tell me. The next one, what is driving that disruption? This is multiple choice, and I believe you can have more than one answer, but what is driving that disruption that you anticipate? We'll give you a little more time so that we don't call the vote too early. This is dizzying. It's like the Kentucky Derby. Okay, no? I think we're going to call it. Okay, maybe not. Done. All right, internal organizational change. I'm really not that smart. Okay, we saw the answers. Can you put those answers back up? Thank you. There we go. Internal organizational change and rationalization. No surprise, we're going to be talking about that in just a few moments. Next, looks like technology disruption, change to the business model. Then family and personal situations and trade-offs. No surprise. Personal performance, capacity for change, and an underperforming business unit. All right. With that, we are going to launch into some questions that are going to touch, thankfully, exactly what you noted here. Thank you very much, Slido. Christian, may I start with you? There are lots of disruptive forces at play today. How are you preparing for those changes?
Yeah, I mean, so let me start on the top, a little bit more strategically, how I think about the transformation that we are all faced, right? I think you hear it around in the agenda of BAFT today, and when you open the newspaper today, I think one of the sort of secular changes is that the sector is craving for efficiency and effectiveness, right? And with that comes a thinning out of the organizations, there's consolidation, there's simply fewer jobs, there's fewer leadership jobs. It's a little bit survival of the fittest, and I think that will invariably accelerate over the very near future, right? On top of that, you layer the advent of AI and advanced technology, which will have a deep impact in certain subsegments of our industry, not only at junior levels, but I think entire products will be sort of revolutionized in the short term, right? If you think about equity research or certain areas of trading, et cetera. So that is happening as well. And then I think there will continue being just secular headcount pressure. There'll be M&A as a disruptive force. So when I take that all together, and actually I did this this morning when we were preparing for this, I jotted down sort of 3 things that I think you need to do that I've been doing over the last 5+ years to kind of get ready for that, right? And that's more based on my own experience and belief. Other people may choose different paths, but so the 3 things for me are moving from specialist to generalist, and I'll come back to that. Moving from operator to change agent, and the third one is focusing more on execution rather than strategy, right? So 3 things. So the first one, I think, if you want to prepare for change in today's day and age, I think having a more generalist, broader experience base, like if you think what Trish did, right? 2 completely different functional areas of expertise brought together into a new opportunity, right? I think more a broadening of your skill set, a broadening of your experience base and exposure helps you prepare for more future opportunities and situations, because it increases the option space, right? So I think that's one, the generalist. The second one, in my view, in today's day and age, organizations that are focused on performance and return, I think they will reward operators more than strategists. They will want to see people get things done, right? A lot of people in this room and in the industry know how to do beautiful PowerPoints. They know how to crunch the data and show great slides, great visions and scenarios, but very few people can actually execute a vision. So I think whatever you can do, whatever we can do, I've always sought opportunities where I can demonstrate and I can augment my own skill sets in actually getting things done rather than just being the smart person in the room and in creating the PowerPoints, right? And so that's the operator, from operator to change agent, and then focus on execution throughout. So I think those are some of the. So what's the so what from that, right? I think you just need to look for opportunities, either projects or new job opportunities, or even change the firms where that asymmetric, nonlinear space presents itself for you. And I think the adversary in doing that is usually risk adversity. So I think along with it has to come a certain propensity and appetite for risk on your personal career. So take a risk on your career, make it nonlinear, augment the option space through that. So sorry for the long-winded
No, that was
answer.
good. That was good. I didn't cut you off, so you're all good. Stephanie, we talk about moments of disruption. One could say those are moments of opportunity. What do you say?
I believe firmly they are moments of opportunity. A disruption.
And by the way,
Yes?
how do you know which is which? How do you know which is which?
I believe disruption is when you reach a turning point. And a turning point means you have an opportunity to make a choice. Opportunity. Your choice can be do nothing. Your choice can be to take a risk and try a new path. So some of these moments of disruption are, as we talked about, they're within your control. Let's say your family wants to move to a new location and your employer does not have any operations in that location. Well, it's your choice, but you have a disruption. You have an opportunity to make a choice. Some of these aspects are beyond your control. You were made redundant. So that's beyond your control. And I'll give you an example in my career where I came to a fork in the road. Again, disruption, fork in the road. I was at the seller side of a merger. And usually the buyer is dictating what happens in a merger. So I was on the sell side. I was told when I went in for a day of interviews with all of the senior people at the seller that I was a keeper. And I was offered a role that in any bank would be considered a lucrative and impressive role. But it was not a management role. And by the way, it was in a city that I wanted to live in. As I felt myself getting closer, I realized I don't want to do that job. I want to continue being a manager. I heard that, and the firm was JP Morgan, had an open role in Europe heading the EMEA Conduit Securitization Group. 2 days later, I was on a plane to London interviewing for the job. 2 weeks later, the moving van was in front of my house. So I had a choice, and I pivoted, and that was quite a disruption and one I couldn't be happier about as I look back.
Fish. After a setback, like missing a revenue target, missing the financials for the quarter, what did you do? What did you do differently? How did you handle it?
So I spoke before about a macro disruption, which led me to move from the second line to the first line, where I'm now responsible for a P&L. And for everyone in this room that is in the first line, you know that the disruptions are immediate and you're only as good as your last monthly revenue. Whereas in the second line, you're not judged normally on a monthly basis like that. But the feedback in the business is immediate. So when you are facing not meeting revenue expectations, I think it's really important to just 100% own it and not come forward with all manner of excuse. So take the same proactive approach to a macro change in your life that you would to these more micro disruptions that can happen on a monthly basis with revenue. Really try and look at the root causes. Some of the root causes may be beyond our control that go against us, but often there are causes beyond our control that go in our favor. So we also have to, I think, treat them equally. So I definitely think that myself and the team, we've responded well to revenue challenges by going on record with what we are doing above and beyond our original commitment to make up for this. Maybe we'll succeed 100%, maybe we won't. But we can't rely on excuses. We have to be out there knowing that we're representing the bank. We are 100% the same as the senior management of the bank who have to answer to the shareholders. And what are we going to do about it? So go on record with additional actions you're taking and then execute on it.
Thank you. Christian, I'm going to ask you a question that we may or may not have talked about, but there's a question on the screen that I'm hoping you can weave into your answer. I would like you to talk to us about how a personal circumstance or personal circumstances shaped a decision that led to a pivot in your career. And then when you're done with that, if you would actually have a look at the question about how can we normalize maternal and paternal leave as part of a high-performing workforce, what would it take for organizations to redesign work so that building a family is not seen as a detour, but as part of a sustainable career?
My goodness, how much time do I have? So,
I'll let you know when you don't have time.
So let me first reflect on a personal trade-off, if you wish, that occurred to me about, I think it was 2013, 14. It was kind of early in my career, or let's say, early mid-level career. Not yet, by the way, in the financial institution space at all. I was doing something completely different. I was helping stand up the intermediate holding company for a European bank in North America, which was a global job. And out of the blue, I got offered a truly path-breaking opportunity. It was basically running a very large operations group, order of magnitude 7,000 people around the world. And it was clearly non-linear, right? It's a situation where somebody trusts in you because you get to know them through a different type of work, and it would present a completely different pathway. And as Stephanie said, by any means of measure in the industry, because of the headcount and the operating responsibility and the globality of it, a huge step up, right? Absolutely step change. And the dilemma was that for a family situation, I was not mobile at that point in time. I had to stay in New York City. And I wanted to stay in New York City because otherwise moving away would have represented a very big trade-off on the family side, which I was not ready to do vis-a-vis the professional opportunity. So think about the situation and the personal dilemma. You have a personal family constraint, which I think many of us have. I just saw earlier in the slider we said 36% of people said that was a real constraint or a trigger for disruption, right? So personal constraint versus a tremendous job opportunity. So I declined, which I second-guessed myself for many, many years for that, because you always think, well, what would have been had I done that? Could I have dealt with, maybe spent more time on the plane, just flying back and forth? I could have reconciled that. But anyway, I didn't do it. I don't know what it would have been. But I think my lesson learned of that situation is those situations will present themselves when you are truly broadening your option space and you're going for it because you really want to pursue a step change in your career. But the more practical guidance that I would deduct from that is, and this is more for the here and now, I think many of us don't articulate clearly enough to the decision makers that will present these opportunities to you what your option space really is. And I'll be very concrete. So have you articulated, how many here have articulated to their organization whether you actually have the aspiration, the drive, and the will to take your immediate superior's job, which can be, if you look at the people in the room, these are very substantial jobs, right? And very often the default of the individual is, well, but then I also have to manage all these other things that entails more risk and more skill that I don't have. I'm not gonna talk about it. I'll just see what happens, right? I think practically, strong guidance would be you have to articulate your aspiration vis-a-vis your immediate environment within your functional line. And beyond that, I would argue you have to articulate constantly to the organization, whether it's somebody, a set of decision makers on the board, or the CEO, depending on how far you're removed, or other executives who will make those calls, what the jobs or the functions or the businesses are that you want to run in a year or in 2 years. Again, it's kind of practical and tactical, but very few people actually do it because they're reticent about ruffling feathers, being seen as cocky and wanting more. But it's part and parcel of you dealing with uncertainty in the near future, because these opportunities will present themselves more so if you are known as an entity that wants to go after that, right? So that would be a little bit reflection on a personal dilemma, and then translating that into guidance for the here and now. So normalize maternal, paternal leave as part of high-performing workforce. I actually believe, at least articulating from the perspective, so I'm reading the first question because I think people see that. I think financial firms, large financial firms, particularly the one that I'm part of now, have actually made huge progress in this area. And I would see that from a minute, so I run an organization with 160 people around the world. I think we actually support these type of career moves and are quite adaptable to them. So I'm not so sure that there is a lot of transformational work to be done on that in the large institutions, maybe in smaller ones or less experienced organizations that haven't dealt with the problem. That is more of a task at hand, right? But I don't know if any of my colleagues have a different view on that.
Oh, no, I 100% agree with everything Christian said, and I think organizations have come a long way in this place. I myself have 3 children. I've always been the working mother. I've had the benefit in some cases of working for a positive organization. At another point, when I had one of my children, I was self-employed. I had to do a trial with a 1-month-old, and there were some challenging aspects to that. But what I will say is you have to set yourself up with an ecosystem around you. You know the mantra, it takes a village. It could be other family members. It could be the hired help. Whatever it is, you can't expect the organization to do it all for you. So I know in my career, managing 3 children, I couldn't have done it without a very large ecosystem around me that, I pretty much never said no if someone asked, can I help?
Trish, can I stay with you for the next question, please? And that is, to sort of pivot us back to setbacks and experiences that we may have in our workforces. Is there an early warning sign that people ignore that they shouldn't? I mean, is there something that you can identify for the audience here based on your experience? And then panelists, I'd be curious to know if you have any others. Something that people should not ignore.
Yeah, I think probably for anyone in this room, if you've been in the same role for the past 3 years and it hasn't fundamentally changed, that's an early warning sign, right? I mean, the pace of change around us is enormous, and you want to move towards where value is created. So whether your role is expanding or whether you're moving laterally into something different, because that's where you see the value moving, that's good. But don't let the grass grow underneath you. That's what my father always used to say to me. You have to keep moving, and if you find yourself in a role for 3 years or so and nothing has really changed, to me that's a warning sign.
If I could also add on that, I think an early warning sign is if you have friction with your manager. Does it seem like you're never on the same page? Did you get a performance review that didn't meet your expectations? That is most definitely a warning sign that you and your manager are on separate pages, and you must have your manager's support because your manager is really controlling pay, promotion, and future roles. And it's not an irreparable situation, but just make sure you're on the same page with your manager. So, Nicole,
Here we are finally. Given that, let's say someone in the audience does not have a good relationship with their manager. What is your advice? What is your advice? What can they take out of this room today to try to repair that relationship?
May I tag on the promotion?
I would love it if you would.
So we talked about helping people prepare for the performance review. Most of our organizations have a goal-setting process earlier in the year. They have a mid-year process. They have a year-end process. Sometimes the goal setting and the mid-year kind of get lost. They become check the box. Do not let them become check the box. These are your opportunities to agree your objectives with your manager. And if you disagree, maybe you're in the wrong role. Not that your boss is wrong. And the mid-year, it's not a check the box. Plan, prepare, ensure you know from your manager, how does your manager think you're performing relative to your objectives? And by the way, not only plan, document. Most of us have a system, we can type this in. Little hint, if you put your mid-year review in writing, it makes your year-end review so much easier because you don't have to try to remember what you did 9 months ago. So put it in writing and then make sure you know where you are relative to others. There are always others. If nobody does what you do in your organization, I guarantee you somebody in another organization does what you do. How do you compare to that person, to the alternative? And then I'll get to the promotion aspect. You should, as Christian said, about making sure your manager and your management chain knows what your career aspirations are. Please do not make your manager read your mind on when you expect a title change or pay for that matter. And so have the conversation. I think I should be considered at the next opportunity for a director role. Here are the reasons why, blah, blah, blah. And then you have a conversation with your manager about what it will take to be promoted. If you do not receive the promotion and it is not consistent in your view with others, let's say it's 5 years between titles, by the way, I made that up, and you've been in the role 5 years and somebody else was in a role 3 years, they got the promotion. You have to have the conversation about why it didn't occur. And there are going to be some situations in your career where you and that manager are never going to be on the same page. And maybe there is an alternative for you within or outside of the organization. But I would continue to try to have that dialogue because most people expect, as Kristen alluded to, management to read their mind. I can tell you as a manager, I certainly try, but it's impossible, so make sure you articulate.
Can I build on that? I think on that, right? I think promotion and appointment to big jobs, yes or no, and by the way, this includes being appointed to the boards, executive boards, being appointed to running a business. Usually these things have a what and a how component. The what component is usually measurable, right? Does this person have run a global organization? Has he or she, have they run big teams? And do they have enough team leadership experience in numbers? Have they produced consistent year-over-year growth, right? And the measurable results. I think where you find trade-outs, misunderstandings, misinterpretations is on the how, it's on the leadership, it's on the qualitative. And I would argue, I would translate it into don't rely too much on your immediate chain of management, meaning your boss or HR, to give you feedback on your own perception of your leadership capabilities, skills, and abilities, because that's where you need a network of trusted supporters in the organization that will give you frank and direct anecdotal feedback on your leadership abilities. It's not going to be only your boss who will sit down multiple times and actually use examples to show you your mirror and say, this project or in this situation or in this client situation, you could have done this and this differently and taken a different approach. That's usually not your boss. These are usually people surrounding you. So I think you need to, at all levels of your career, you need to build up a network of counselors who can give you confidential, but also very direct, true feedback so that you can reflect upon how are you actually developing those leadership skills necessary for that big next step.
And I think those are actually two really good tips for all of you in here. One, cultivate a network of peers, friends, people who've seen you perform, people who understand your organization, who will give you honest feedback about how you are perceived, because at the end of the day, your brand is everything. And if you simply rely on your boss for your brand, depending upon your relationship with your boss, frankly, depending upon a lot of things, that is not the only source of data. My second comment that I want to just touch on, Stephanie mentioned as well. I am a recruiter. We all know what I do. And I'm into data, particularly if you're going to send me a CV. And I am astounded when I talk to people and there is no data at all on a CV. Nothing to show that you've performed in any way whatsoever. You just think you're seasoned and liked and wonderful, and that's all good. I believe you, but I really don't. My point about the data is not on the CV side of it, but when you go in for a performance review, when you go in for your appraisal, you most definitely should have a piece of paper with your accomplishments and data to show your value, your contribution, the significant aspect of what you have delivered. If you are going into your performance reviews just, I've done well, here's my job description, I did it. No, not enough. Definitely not enough. Stephanie, if I may go back to you, how do you know when it's time to stay and rebuild or when it's time to go?
The first thing I would say is, can the problem be fixed? Going back to my original examples, you and your family have decided to move to a city where your employer has no roles. Would your employer consider remote? There's a way to fix the problem. You were made redundant. My second example. Well, if you work for an organization, chances are there are other openings in the organization. So can the problem be fixed? The second is exactly what Nicole just mentioned, your reputation and your network. Your reputation and your network are built taking a tremendous amount of effort and attention. So leaving an organization means that you may have to start all over again. A very senior executive at Bank of America, when I was arguing that my whole team should make the money that the new hire was going to get because the new hire was getting more money. And this person looked at me, he said, no, I disagree. He said, the amount I pay someone to come from someone else represents the risk premium I am paying them because they are taking a chance and they have to start again. So consider what it will take to rebuild in a new firm. The last question I would ask you, do you like your job? Do you like your boss? Do you like your company? It is so important when you wake up in the morning to want to go in and to want to make a difference. And if you don't, just consider the grass is always greener. Every role has upsides and downsides. So when you make that decision away from your current role or company, just know that there are risks to that and be prepared. And whatever you decide, it's not forever.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions here. I'm going to be very honest. I don't think we can get into, in the event of a downsize, how do you negotiate a severance package, because I think that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. I have opinions on that. Oh, I didn't mean for you to like just take it off, but sorry. But I think it's an important question. I'm just afraid we really can't address that here. I do want to get to the others. What are your thoughts on pay transparency? Again, I think that's probably a different topic, but if anybody wants to answer that, please.
I can give my opinion on that. I think I think in junior ranks, junior to mid-level, I think pay transparency is a very positive thing, because it's more driven by comparable advancement paths and comparable performance metrics. So I think I don't. And by the way, more junior people share that information anyway, so you can't avoid it. I believe that at more mid-level to senior level, you have so many different aspects that impact pay and compensation and the components of compensation and how it develops over time. I find it hard to try to create too much transparency on that. And by the way, if you're interested in seeing how you compare, there's so much data out there anyway now that you can do your own research. But I think if the question was directed at should we share our pay with the person that I'm having breakfast with to see how they're doing, I think that's a bad idea.
I'll just add one comment on that. So I'm not an employment lawyer, so I really only know some of the employment law in New York because that's where I'm based. But I think one of the really positive developments in the pay space has been the new change where you cannot ask an employee their prior salary. I think that's particularly impactful for junior and mid-level staff, so that you can really get paid what you're worth and not just based on your prior salary history. And particularly for women who, studies have shown tend to get paid from entry-level job less than men. It gives, but this also impacts men too. It gives people an ability to catch up and just be paid based on their skills and experience. And as a hiring manager, I 100% see this, and it's a very positive change in the law.
Thank you. Christian, a question for you. No, not that one.
No.
I'm coming up with it. If you could go back in time to a pivotal moment of change or a setback, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently?
Great question. Well done. So I go back to a moment. I had an opportunity. I was progressing well in other financial institutions, and I had a couple of options, 3 options. Long story short, I was offered this bizarre, unknown opportunity to go into Mexico and build up a new business there, which back then I didn't know what that industry was, but it was in the transaction banking industry. And it was for a very large financial institution that is well represented here today. This is literally 15 years ago, and I declined that because it was high risk. I had no clue what they were talking about. And again, it goes back to the thing. And I chose another one, which was in my backyard. I understood what it was. I understood the people I would be working with, and I understood the clients. So the path that I chose was disrupted by a merger about 6 months later and lasted very shortly. Whereas the opportunity of having gone into Mexico and built up that business, I think would have taken me probably actually on this stage in a much faster way than what ended up happening. So lesson learned is really like go for the, again, I know it's a bit of a repeat, but go for the sort of asymmetric risks, go for the non-linear opportunities when you trust the leadership around you that has clearly made a bet of trying you out in that non-linear space.
Can I ask a follow-on question? And this is for any panelist to answer. And this is not rehearsed. Okay, so you've done that. You've taken that non-linear approach. It failed. You bombed. It didn't work. Then what?
Do it again. You've got another disruption. you've got a turning point, which means you have a choice, which means you have an opportunity. You didn't expect it to be so soon, but it was.
And in that regard, Stephanie, how do you manage your reputation when it goes south? How do you manage the reputation out there versus the kinds of things you tell yourself inside?
And, well, as far as telling yourself inside, don't be so hard on yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. Be frank with yourself, take action, move on. That's yourself. With respect to your reputation, your party line internally is the corporation's party line. Do not point fingers, do not complain. You can do that with your circle of closest advisors outside of the company. So with your reputation, when asked, it is unfortunate that XYZ, it is unfortunate that my group downsized and I pulled the short straw and I've been made redundant. You immediately follow with, in my role, I was able to achieve A, B, and C. In my next role, I'm going to continue to learn and grow and meet the objectives of my new role. So it's unfortunate it happened. Here are the great things I did when I was there, and here are the great things I'm going to do.
Anything to say on that? You don't
No,
have
I mean,
to.
I have
'cause
so
more
much to
questions.
say.
All right.
You know, there's been so many different pivots in my career, and some of the best ones have just been made really without a lot of counsel from anyone. When I took a lateral move and relocated from New York to Hong Kong with the whole family, that was a great move. I didn't worry about the package. It turned out just to be the best 5 years in terms of the family experience, in terms of professional growth. I've had a lot of people over the years come to me for advice on relocating, and whenever I see someone leading with, what about the package, what about the package? That's never the answer or the approach. That's, in my view, going to lead you to the greatest success. So that's just one point on pivoting. And then in terms of things that haven't gone wrong, and it's once you realize that you're not in the right spot, you just have to like own it and move back. So I mentioned how I relocated to London to be this global co-head. That was really a bad move and for my family. And I have lots of regrets about that I've really tried to make up for. But once I realized that it wasn't the right place for me to be at that time in my life, I got myself back to New York. And nothing is forever, you know. It's a long game, and, you know, there'll be other times.
Thank you. I would like to actually address some of the questions that you've brought up. I will actually address the top one over the next few years. Which skills do you expect will become or remain integral to people and agent management? I'm not really catching that one. But I'm not sure this is the right session to talk about skills, so forgive me. I don't think we're going to be able to answer that one. But please, whoever asked that question, please feel free to ask any one of us over the course of the next couple of days. But we have some themes here in terms of the other questions. If you believe your manager is sidelining you or not supporting your growth, should you speak with their manager? I have a lot to say about that, but I'm not a panelist. What if you love your job but you're not aligned with your management, and can you provide advice on balancing work and family life and setting boundaries? I would like to, if we could, go for the top one. If you believe your manager is sidelining or not supporting your growth, should you speak with their manager? Anyone, panelists?
I mean, it may be a little bit simplistic. I would always advise first trying to develop that discussion with your manager directly rather than going around them. If that doesn't work, I don't know if it's their manager necessarily that you want to engage with, but try to engage with a trusted person that you are aware can speak to your manager, and try to get an independent opinion on what's going on, kind of like a counselor or an advisor, a third party that can just develop that additional insight. But I wouldn't like categorically, like with a dispute or anything, go to the manager's manager. That sounds like a very formalistic approach in a probably very complex situation.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I mean, I was in a situation like that myself, where I felt particularly unsupported by a manager. And it's really nuanced, right? It may not be a winning strategy to go to your manager's manager. And so I like your advice on other counsel, or, you know, if you think you're really in a no-win situation, it's probably a sign to move on in the organization or elsewhere.
That's right, and that was going to be my comment, because I happen to have done that in my career. It did not work out well for me. Let's just put it that way. And there were many other options I had, but I chose the wrong option, and then had to pivot. Hence, I am a recruiter. And
Nicole,
very happy to share my personal story some other time. Best thing that could ever have happened to me.
Nicole, may I sneak in on this one?
Please
I'm,
do.
I'm an unequivocal no for that. Do not go to your manager's
correct.
manager. If there's a breach of policy or procedure that you're being asked to undertake, I'm sure you have an escalation procedure in your organization. It's likely anonymous. Proceed with that. HR is always there, but again, be judicious. But what you can do is find a way for your manager's manager to see how you perform and to get to know you. Is there a client situation where you can say, I'd like to bring person X out with me to meet a client? Or do you mind if I present this idea or proposal to the manager? The more that person knows you, the more that person will create their own independent review of you away from the direct manager.
That's an excellent point. I do have a closing question for all of you, and then I'm going to come back to the questions on Slido. What do you recommend attendees do today to prepare for disruption? What can everybody here do in the coming days or week to prepare for disruption?
I'll start. It's something I commented on earlier. Be an early mover towards value, right? Don't wait. It's not about the person who's the most adaptable or the person who tries to get ahead of disruption. It's right now we're all seeing value someplace, and be the one that jumps in on that as fast as possible.
I'll sneak in. Know what your flexibilities are before a disruption. Disruptions are stressful, even good ones. Would you be willing to take a lower title to get new experience in digital assets? Would you be willing to take less money, again, for a new opportunity? Are you willing to move? Are you willing to travel more, travel less? Go over all of these questions. Don't wait for them to be asked. Then you're ready for the disruption to occur.
I just say, make yourself be heard in the organization as to what your aspirations are and what you want to do next. And secondly, just be incredibly intellectually curious about opportunities out there around you or outside, and educate yourself for those opportunities if you're missing a certain area of expertise that would qualify you for that.
Thank you. I think we have just a few more minutes, 3 more minutes. Would any of you like to address the questions here in front of us? And/or are there any other questions that somebody wants to throw up on the board? I invite you to do so. It's like a Bueller.
Okay, I'll take the top one. If you're not aligned with your management, I guess I would ask you, are your beliefs and assumptions realistic? I had a conversation with a young man who was thinking of leaving a company that he'd worked with since he graduated from university. And he said, I just think they're too risk averse. And I chuckled. I'm like, if you ever get a bank that's not risk averse, tell me where it is. And I realized that the expectations were not realistic. And I made a suggestion to the person that they pursue another group within the organization that I thought were well suited for their skills. They did. They got a role. They're thrilled. They really didn't have a problem with the organization. They just wanted change. So.
I always hate this question because I'm a bad one to answer it, but I'm balancing work and family life. So I'll just tell you, a lesson learned. So I definitely have not been a model of balancing work and life for a lot of my career. I mean, I'm not proud to tell you, I didn't attend my son's middle school graduation because I was on a business trip. And I have lots of examples like that. But what I will tell you is I have fundamentally made a change as my children have been older, to really commit to certain things. And it's more than just words. So I've made a commitment to never miss one of my son's sporting events. And I mean it when I say I never miss one. I arrange all my travel around it. So I try and make it more than just words that I'm balancing, work and family life. It's a serious priority. And I change a lot of things, miss a lot of things so that I can attend those games. But I'm definitely not a model for this, but I've tried to learn from some serious past mistakes.
Thank you. I think we're really out of time. These are really good questions. Anybody want to tackle the next two? Networking opportunities, and then what was the most exciting time or moment that stands out in your career?
I think people should just use BAFT in the next 2 days to seek us out and discuss these questions. That's what BAFT is all about. It's networking, it's building relationships, and seek out if you're early mid-level career, seek out people who really strike you as being future leaders of this industry, and build a relationship and follow up, and be constructive and proactive about it.
And I think that's excellent. And I think it is time to go, but I think on that point for networking and BAFT, I invite all of you, honestly, you should not leave here without meeting at least 3 people that you do not currently know, and just walk up to them. Be intentional and walk up to them. All right, I want to thank my panelists, Stephanie and Trish and Christian. Thank you for coming.